very much all for coming today on this beautiful fall day and volunteering to spend an hour indoors with me. I'll try to be as entertaining as possible, give you as many bright colored pictures as possible to match the leaves outside. Thank you to Jay for hosting me and to the Clarke Institute, this wonderful museum. I would like to begin, if you would humor me, by having you all close your eyes for just a moment and try to imagine the single most desired object in history. So what do you picture when you think of that? Well, a lot of people would picture something that could be categorized best as mythical history, the Holy Grail, the Ark of the Covenant, Excalibur, maybe a crown that might be a metaphor for a kingdom. Or maybe you picture something like the Fountain of Youth or El Dorado, the Golden City. But what of real objects, objects that we can identify, objects that are extant, we know exactly where they are, we know that they did exist, and we can visit them still today? Well, one might argue that the painting that I'd like to speak about today is the single most desired artwork in history, but also perhaps the most desired object in history. It's certainly the most frequently stolen. It was stolen on 7 different occasions, but more impressive than that, it's been involved in 13 different crimes, the object of 13 different crimes over its 600-year lifespan, making it both the most victimized and the most frequently stolen object in history. But from an art history standpoint, it's also reasonable to argue that this is the single most important, influential painting ever made. And I'd like to talk a little bit about why that is. And this project was fun for me because I get to wear my 2 different hats. One hand an art historian, on the other hand a historian of art crime. And this painting is an ideal lens through which to examine the history of crimes against art, because pretty much anything bad that could happen to an artwork happened to this one painting. And also as an influential work in the history of art. So what I've prepared today is a combination of a little bit of talking off the cuff and a little bit of prepared material that is involved in quotations from the book that I thought would set the scene particularly well. And one of the great advantages of art history lectures is that art historians always like to hide behind lots of pretty pictures that we put in slideshows because we assume that no one would ever want to listen to us if we were just speaking by ourselves. And there's always the joke that art historians only read books with pictures in them. I'm going to show you lots of images that were actually didn't make it into the book. There is an image insert in the book, but we have far too many close-ups of various panels in this painting. So this is particularly fun, and I'm very glad to share it with you. So I'll begin with a section from the book. The pale breath of their acetylene lamps cut through the darkness in the mine shaft, picking out salt crystals that speckled the slick red rock walls. Captain Robert K. Posey and Private First Class Lincoln Kirstein were the first Allied officers inside the salt mine hidden deep in the Austrian Alps, the secret art storage depot that held over 12,000 of Europe's greatest artworks, looted by Nazi art hunters. Hitler had dreamt of creating a super museum, one that would encompass an entire city and display all of the masterpieces of the conquered world. He sent forth agents across the territory freshly subdued by his stormtroopers, stealing art to hoard in a web of subterranean hideouts and cliff-top castles. And now, thanks to the incredible heroism of an Austrian double agent, along with a dose of wile and good fortune, the first Allied monuments officers, 2 American GIs, had found the mother lode, the salt mine at Altasi, converted into a high-tech stolen art storehouse filled with the most important artworks in Nazi-conquered world. In the darkness 3/8 of a mile along the mine shaft, Captain Posey and Private Kirstein unconsciously bent their heads. They looked up and saw a lattice of wires, some broken and dangling, linked to undetonated explosives half buried in the shaft ceiling. Someone had meant to blow up every one of the mine's treasures. A half-mile further on, Posey and Kirstein reached an iron door. Their guides, Austrian miners working with the resistance, unlocked 2 large padlocks. They opened the heavy door slowly, the weight of it grinding against the ground. There before them spread the first storeroom for Hitler's Museum of Looted Art. As they explored cavern after cavern, the extent of the hoard and its state-of-the-art storage facility came to light. One enormous grotto alone contained multiple galleries of art, each 3 stories tall. This room housed paintings by Rubens, Rembrandt, Tintoretto, Titian, Van Dyck, and Veronese. Vermeer's portrait of the artist in his studio, Titian's Danae, Raphael's Madonna of Divine Love, Filippino Lippi's Annunciation, Palma Vecchio's Sacred Conversation, Van Dyck's Crucifixion, Bruegel's The Blind Leading the Blind were just a few of the incomparable treasures in that chamber alone. Another caverns was only 50 feet long and 30 feet wide, yet contained 2,000 paintings, stashed in 2-story storage racks along 3 walls in a column down the center of the chamber. But one masterpiece in particular eluded them. It was perhaps the most important painting in the history of art. It was certainly the most frequently stolen. They had been seeking it since rumor of its theft reached them in Paris more than a year before. It was the prized trophy of both Hitler and his second-in-command, Hermann Göring. The 2 fanatical Nazi art hunters sought to outmaneuver one another to capture it for their personal delectation. Against Hitler's orders, one of Göring's henchmen had stolen it from a castle in the south of France and brought it to Paris. And then it disappeared. Through their researches, Posey and Kirstein had learned of the many crimes involving Jan van Eyck's masterwork, the Ghent altarpiece, also referred to by the subject of its central panel, the Adoration of the Mystic Lamb. It had been the victim of every conceivable transgression that could imperil a work of art. Indeed, over the course of 5 centuries, it had rarely remained intact in its place of origin for more than a few years at a time. Its habit of disappearing was all the more amazing considering that the Renaissance altarpiece consists of 12 painted oaken panels and weighs around 2 tons. The Ghent altarpiece was #1 on the Allied Army's list of the most wanted lost artworks. But was it here in the salt mine? I'll give you a hint, it was there. Since its completion in 1432, one monumental 12-panel oil painting has disappeared, been looted in 3 different wars, been burned, dismembered, copied, forged, smuggled, illegally sold, painted over, censored, attacked by iconoclasts, hidden away, hunted by Nazis and Napoleon, prized by the Louvre and a Prussian king, damaged by conservators, returned as war reparations, stored in castle vaults and secret salt mines, used as a diplomatic tool, nearly been blown up, been ransomed, rescued by Austrian double agents, and stolen a grand total of 13 times. It's exhausting just reading the list. Imagine this poor painting. No other artwork has been subject to so many adventures and crimes, both attempted and successful. And through its story, one may examine the history of collecting, the human psychology of possession, and the politics of art in war. Though an inanimate object, the enormous altarpiece and all its intricacies and intrigues develops a personality of its own. Indeed, this disappearing masterpiece seems to loathe to stand still for too long. The monetary and cultural value of the art aside, the history of art theft is the story of the capture and recapture of symbols. Of the many crimes in which the Ghent altarpiece was involved, few were motivated by financial gain alone. The possession, retention, and seizure of art is about owning what no one else can and what people most admire. Rarely discussed by scholars, the history of art crime is a human psychological drama, a tug-of-war of ownership woven with ideological, religious, political, and social motivations that are provoked or embodied by the art in a way that no other inanimate object sustains. And the Ghent altarpiece, with its biography of twists and turns, is an ideal lens through which to examine this phenomenon. I thought I'd speak first, just very briefly, and I'm happy to answer questions afterwards, about art crime in general, before we turn to this painting in particular. Jay mentioned the think tank that I founded called ARCA. We're an international nonprofit consultancy and research group that studies the phenomenon of art crime, asking the question how the history and study of art crime can help protect art in the future and recover art in active cases of theft. And we're trying to create a field of study that essentially has not existed before. There are very few people who have actually studied art crime. Part of the reason for this is it's inherently interdisciplinary, and the world of academia is shy about crossing over between disciplines. And in this field, you need to be able to comfortably wind your way through criminology, art history, archaeology, aspects of law, security and police studies,